hi. I love seeing all your faces. So this is Kids Comics Meetup. I think a lot of you have been on these calls in the past. For some of you, it might be your first time. This is a meetup that I've been doing just since last year. I started it in December, and originally it was an in-person thing in New York City. And then coronavirus happened, and now it's online, which has actually been amazing because now so many more people can come, and it's just blossomed into this amazing thing. So there are, I didn't even know if I should say it's a silver lining to this horrible cloud of the virus, but we'll take what we can get, I guess. So today our special guest is Jenni Holm, who is just such an amazing force in children's literature, who is so prolific and works in so many diverse genres that it is incredibly inspiring, and I can't wait to hear some more details about how she does that. I just want to mention that she has won the Newbery Honor 3 times. She's a New York Times bestseller, and she works both in prose and she writes graphic novels with her brother Matthew Holm. And the graphic novel series are Babymouse and Squish and Sunny Side Up. Are there any other graphic novels, Jenni, that I'm missing?
We have a little board book series for emerging readers called My First Comics, which are
oh, cool. Oh, I didn't have that listed.
Yeah.
When did that come out?
It came out maybe 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, cool, cool. Okay, so since this group here is mainly graphic novel creators, there's some people who are just writers, there's some people who are just artists, and then there are some people who do both. Mm-hmm. This talk is going to be totally focused on like career stuff, like how do you build a career in children's books and children's graphic novels. Yep. So I know one question that everybody loves to ask somebody like you who's been who's so established is like, how did you get started? What was your first, tell us the story of how you decided to get into kids books and your first break.
So I actually kind of fell into it. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, and after college, I promptly broke my parents' heart and moved to New York City. And this is in 1990, when it was a very different New York City than today. And I just was a small town girl who wanted to live in the big city. And I got a job. I fell into a job at a production company, an animation company called Broadcast Arts. And they were very famous for creating Pee-wee's Playhouse and for doing a lot of stop motion animation, clay animation. And this is back in the day when everything was shot on film. And so at the studio where I worked, there were a lot of freelancers working for as our animators. And so our animators freelanced between animation and often sometimes between the comic book world. So like if they were not working on a Marvel issue, they'd come over and do a little coloring on a TV commercial. So that was kind of, sort of my first like brush in with working comics as freelancers. And then over the next couple years, I wrote my first novel, which is historical fiction. It's called Our Only May Amelia. It has nothing to do with comics. It takes place in the 1890s. And after I wrote it, it took me about 3 more years to get an agent. Finally got an agent, and she sold it pretty quickly to HarperCollins. And by that time, I was working as a producer at a big ad agency called Ogilvy and Mather, producing television commercials. And so after May Amelia was published, it received a Newbery Honor, which was amazing. It was like a huge career boost, and HarperCollins signed me on to 3 more books. But I was living in New York City, and as you know, it's a very hard place to survive. And so then for years after that, I would freelance in advertising and write my books. And I was very fortunate. My bosses were always really very encouraging of me to kind of go into to do the writing, because being a producer in TV is not creative, really. You're like the one who deals with the money and hires people and says no all the time. So it's kind of like being a mom. I'm good at being a mom now. No, so anyway, yeah, and so then I started mostly writing historical fiction books, and then around 2001, my brother Matt was living in New York City, and we came up with the idea for Babymouse, and this was before graphic novels, and it took us about 2 years, but we finally sold it to Random House. And so that's how we got started. And it's a family business, and so I can never stop working. So.
Tell me a little bit about the very first book that you worked on. How long did it take you to write it?
The novel?
Mm-hmm.
It took about 3 years because I wrote it. It's inspired. My father was Finnish American, and so it's inspired by his kind of farm childhood. And I wrote it over a couple of years. Researched it with living members of my family who still remembered what it was like somewhat. And, it was just something that I would do at night or on the weekends. And actually, I thought it was an adult book because there was quite a lot of violence in it. And there still is, to this day, there's a lot of violence. And so when my agent sent it out, she had me take out all the rough stuff. But then when my editor bought it, she made me put it all back in.
Oh, wow.
There's like a serial killer, a baby dies. Like, it is unending tragedy, this book. Yeah. So it was just, I did kind of fall into the genre, but I found that I really loved it. It's such a warm, welcoming community. Kids writers, like, they really want to help you succeed. It's not particularly competitive because there's a whole new generation of kids every single year. A whole new generation is introduced to Babymouse in every first grade class, and they're brand new, fresh readers. So it's very evergreen.
So when you wrote that first book and you were thinking of it as an adult book, was it your agent who first said to you, maybe you should consider making this a children's? Yeah,
so the agent that I finally got, I had reams and reams of rejections. She said, she said very honestly, I can send this out as an adult book, but I actually think this is a kid's book. And I said, really? It's really violent. There's a lot of death. And she's like, yeah. And so, you listen to people who know better than you. So I did.
So tell me a little bit about that journey of getting an agent, because I know there's a lot of people on this call who are probably really interested in that.
Yeah, so it was a different world. So I got my agent in 1996. So this was kind of pre-internet in a way. There used to be a book called The Writer's Handbook, or I think it was Writer's Almanac, Writer's Handbook, I don't know. It was red, it was big, it was in the library, and it would list agents and what genres they were looking for. I think the world is much easier now. There's the internet, and most agents who are actively soliciting manuscripts, they usually put on their site what they're looking for. And I think that it's good to understand that, because some agents only represent children's authors, some represent comics creators, some represent food writers. I have a particularly unusual agent. Her name is Jill Grinberg. She represents kind of everything, but she's her own shingle. She's not part of a bigger agency. So I would say she's not the norm. And I've been with her the entire time. I've been with her longer than my husband. So,
tell us a little bit about, is there anything that you kind of wish you had known when you started your career, or advice that you give now often to people who are starting out?
Well, I would say don't quit your day job is my best advice. I feel like once you have to do art you have to do your art to pay your bills, it takes a bit of the joy out of it, and you start to second guess yourself a lot. I would say your second book is the hardest book you'll ever write, because the first book will probably be a little effortless, and you won't have any guardrails on you yet. I think it's really important to either have somebody in your life who can be your editor before you send something to your editor. So, before I had kids, my husband was sort of my first editor, and he was good at it because he was a dramaturgist in theater, which is kind of like a playwright's editor. So he was really good about telling me what was wrong. And I think what you learn when you start writing is that, an editor or somebody who's reading it's not like, so I don't have a master's degree. I didn't go to like a writing school for graduate school or anything. And I heard those can be quite cutthroat and tough. But I think generally when somebody reads your draft and they see something wrong, it's probably something is wrong, because they're not getting what you're trying to put across. So they're not being mean is what I'm saying. So.
Right.
They're just, sometimes, like, it happens to me still, like, I'll have it in my head that, of course, that's on the page, but it's probably not on the page. And the editor will say, I don't understand what you're talking about. And I think, but I wrote it there. What else? I think if you want to be a children's author or be a children's illustrator, you should join an organization called SCBWI, which is the worst like acronym. It's called the Society, it's horrible, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. I was not involved in it for many years in my career, but it's a really wonderful organization. They workshop all around the world, all around the country. Agents go there to their conferences, you know, when COVID stops. Editors go. It's where a lot of people find representation and sell books.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing to attend.
Cool. You know, you said something about revision, which definitely piqued my interest. So do you find that when you're working on a book that is there a typical pattern to the revision process, or does it vary greatly from book to book? Like one book might require like tons of blood, sweat, and tears, and then another one just flows out?
I'm a serial reviser. Like I revise endlessly. Like I'm doing just a final. This is a final like page pass. So they've set my text the way it's going to look in a book, and I'm so glad this one's almost done. But before that, I'd rewritten this book like 6 or 7 times. So you don't have to be like me. I mean,
do you rewrite it many times and then show it to your husband, editor, and then your agent?
Yes. So I always think of my first draft is I hate writing a first draft. I just want to get something on the page. Once I have something on the page, then I revise it and revise it. I even use outside editors to review my manuscripts before I send them to my editor to just, you know, see how, because now that we have kids, he can't work for me, so.
Yeah. Wow, that is such good information. I think there's probably a lot of people who don't realize that you would do that. Send something to an editor before you send it to your official editor.
Yeah, you know, and I think it's because I've kind of grown up in the industry, so I wrote the book when I was 23 and I sold it when I was 26. And in the 90s, I would say publishing was a very, it was the flush years of the publishing industry, a lot of employees, very, you know, very great. But around, you know, during the big recession in 2007, a lot of editors were laid off. Everybody was laid off. It was they took a huge hit. And so now agents are really agents are kind of like the gatekeepers for editors. I find generally speaking, editors are completely overwhelmed. They've got too much on their lap and they're dealing with managerial things. So I think anything to like lighten their load is helpful. So to get your manuscript in better shape is a good thing, you know?
Yeah. I totally agree with how you would characterize how the industry is.
Yeah, like this fantasy that like there's an editor in New York City just sitting around for somebody to send them a manuscript is like as far as from the truth as possible. You know, they have family, they have lives, they might be pregnant, they might be getting married, they have millions of manuscripts coming in, and anytime they take something on, that's going to be a huge commitment to them. So you have to kind of do your part in that commitment, I think.
Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about Babymouse specifically, since that was the first graphic novel that you worked on with Matthew? And could you say, like, how did you guys first decide that you were going to try to do this? And then what kind of a reaction did you get when you first sent it out? Because it was this, like we talked about, it was before the whole graphic novel boom.
Yep. So Matt's my youngest brother. I'm one of 5. I have 4 brothers, so I grew up with a lot of boys. I'm the middle child. I didn't know Matt very well growing up because he's 6 years younger than me, so he was just that annoying toddler, like in the background. Like we were never in school at the same time. And I really got to know him as an adult because I was living in New York City in a studio apartment, and he graduated from Penn State and he moved to New York and had an internship as an editor at Country Living magazine for Hearst. And so of course he lived with his sister for free for a few months, and when you live with somebody for free, you get to know them. And it was fine, and I'd always been his biggest admirer. He'd always done cartooning when he was little, and through high school and college. He had an internship with Tony Opp, who was a very famous Pulitzer-winning political cartoonist at the Philadelphia Inquirer, who just passed a couple years ago. And so we actually worked together on other things before we worked on Babymouse. Because he was at Hearst, I would have him do some of my copy editing for me, because he's a great copy editor, actually. And on my other books, my historical fiction books. And then there was another book we worked on briefly called Middle School is Worse Than Meatloaf, which has art in it. And there's art from the point of view of the character's brother. And so I asked my editor if he could do the art, and she said sure, so he did that art. And then we came up with the idea for Babymouse, and we sent it around. So this would have been like early 2001. We sent it around town, and was completely shot down everywhere for a lot of reasons. One, there were no graphic novels yet, so there was no space on the table. There was nowhere to put it in a bookstore. Like, how did you market something that doesn't exist in Barnes and Nobles or in libraries? And nobody had done the production of them either. And I guess about 2 years passed, and I've never been one to be discouraged when somebody says no to me about anything. And so I decided I'm just going to take it out again, but I'm going to take it out ad agency style. Like, I went in person and pitched it to all the publishing houses myself and did like a whole song and dance. And we kind of gave them like a 40-page like pitch packet. And around that time, Scholastic Graphics was spinning up, and they had acquired Bone. And we pitched it to Random House, and they just wanted it right away. And I think the reason Random House got it, Babymouse skews pretty young. It's like first, second graders. And they had been very successful in that part of the market with Junie B. Jones and the Magic Tree House. So they really respected those readers. It's not a very sexy age, 7 and 8 year olds, but they really got it. And so when Babymouse first did come out, it was actually shelved with early readers. So over the years, it's been shelved everywhere. Before graphic novels was with early readers, then we had graphic novels. Now we have young adult graphic novels and middle grade graphic novels. So
right. Who's the editor? Who was the original editor of Babymouse?
Shayna Corey was the original
that's
editor.
I thought. Yeah, she's really.
She edits a lot of comic book people. So
yeah, she's amazing. So let's see, what were the other things I want? Oh, about the process. Because I've heard through the grapevine that you have like a really interesting process that you do with Matt together to do the comics.
Yeah, so what's funny is when we sold Babymouse, we were actually both living in New York City at the time. And then after we sold it, we both left. He went to upstate New York, and I moved to Maryland. Because we always end up following our spouses around for their jobs. So that's the unfortunate part of being a writer, is you're very portable. Yeah, so the way we work, so because I came up in advertising, I kind of just cribbed the model that of how TV commercials are made. So TV commercials are made using something called a storyboard. Let me just see if I have any. Hang on. Over here. This is what I get for cleaning up, right? I don't have any out, but basically a storyboard is just, is there a way, can you share a screen on Zoom?
Yes, actually, I think I have to give you permission. Yes, I just did. So can you see it?
Yeah, let me just see if I can open up if I have a storyboard here. Hang on 1 second. If I can open this. Come on, little computer, you can do it. All right. So it just shows the screen I'm on? Is that how it works?
I think so.
Okay, let me open this up. Hang on 1 second.
People have been making a lot of comments about the artwork that's behind your head.
Oh. I am a huge romance fan. Oh, you want to see that? I would say that romance is my first secret love. And this is A Teaspoon of Murder.
Oh, wow.
A Harlequin intrigue. This is the original art from it.
Wow. Wow. Well, the romance genre, I feel like that's one of those genres that is they're so pioneering right now in terms of
amazing,
like how authors are making a living. I think it's like those intense genre writers who are really creative and amazing in like how they survive.
Okay, I'm just sharing screen. It says desktop share. Let's see if it works. Allow. Yep, I'm allowing it. All right, come on, share screen. Desktop. Open system preferences. Sorry. Yeah. So I just zoom.
I think you have to click. Do you see a bunch of boxes? You have to click on one, I think.
I just have to click on the zoom box.
Yeah, and then I'm trying to remember exactly how I do it.
Zoom, you also will be able to record the contents of your screen. Okay, I'll just put, or do it on your own later. Okay. I have no idea. Okay, I'm sorry. This is a fail. Anyway, so just imagine a storyboard is, it's four. I'll just draw one. There, I'll just draw with a piece of paper. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. We'll draw it. It looks like very fancy.
Uh-huh.
The top row is the narration. The middle row describes the action, and the bottom row is the dialogue. So that's how I break out my story.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like your sentence mapping. And so that's how we do it. So I'll use a storyboard, which is, each page looks like this. For a baby mouse book, it's about 50 pages. For a Sunny book, it's maybe 170, something like that. And then I'll email that to Matt, and he'll do lots of quick little pencil sketches, just pencil. We're kind of a high-tech, low-tech combination of making comics. He'll just do pencil sketches, then he'll scan all of his art, email it to me, then I'm still kind of on the low-tech path right now, and then I'll just take scissors and sticky tape, sticky glue, and then I'll cut and paste it, the art, the way it's going to look. So yes, and I would say normally writers and artists don't collaborate like this, but I mean, Matt and I found out very quickly how much work it is to do a graphic novel. It was just absolutely overwhelming, so we had to figure out a way to offload some of the art onto me. And so I lay out the whole book. And when we're happy with the layout, I'll scan all of it. I'll scan the pages and send it back to him. And then he uses a Cintiq. So a Cintiq is a souped up computer with a drawing pad that a lot of comic creators use. And he'll trace over my layouts and ink them. And then for the Sunny books, we have somebody else color them. And for the Baby Mouse books and Squish books, he has usually colored them.
Wow, that is so fascinating.
So we've had to just kind of MacGyver, like, what is the fastest, least amount of work, but there's still so much work involved. So.
How long start to finish does it usually take for you guys to do a graphic novel?
I think 2 years. For the Sunny books, we're on 2 years. Baby Mouse books have just been all over the place. Like 1 year we did 4 and almost had nervous breakdowns. We prefer like 1 a year. It's fine now. We're old now. We could do it at the beginning, but that was like 2003. So
at the same time that you're actually, this is my question. How many projects are you usually working on at any given time? At the same time?
Yeah, we're usually working on, at least 3 projects at different stages. So right now, I just gave Matt, I just had the final manuscript of the new Sunny book was finished and approved. So he started to sketch and he's delivering me art and I'm starting to lay them out. While he's doing that, I'm writing, you know, the next, we have a picture book we have to do. And then sort of concurrent to that, I usually have a novel every 3 or 4 years. So I'm just doing final copy edits on that. So Matt has a big spreadsheet in his office. He's very OCD, but really it's more dependent on, our schedule is driven by the art because the art takes longer. So
yeah. Okay, somebody just left an art question in the chat. It's Tom, and he said, I'm curious how they arrived at the limited color palette, black and white art of Babymouse versus full color.
Yeah, that's good. So it was the first time, you know, anybody had done a graphic novel. So we had to figure out, you know, the production process, how to work with Random House, like literally, how does the art director work? How does the editor work? How do approvals go? And there was no way we could do full color because there was only one Matt and one Jenny. So it didn't make sense price-wise then, and we just didn't have the mental bandwidth. Now, of course, everything's all in color, and so most people hire colorists to do that. I mean, there are some people who color themselves, but I don't really know who. I'm sure there's some people out there who do.
Okay.
But yeah, so we just added one spot color. That was just to keep our sanity, honestly.
Uh-huh. And then how about your personal schedule as a creative person? Like, do you have a very rigid schedule where you work on a certain type of thing in a certain day, or are you very free flowing? Like, how do you, because you have so many different types of projects and so many different stages, how do you manage that?
You kind of have to, I'm a little free flowing. I'm not like Stephen King sits down at 9 in the morning and writes until 5,000 words a day. That's never been me, and we kind of can't with this schedule. So, I mean, Matt and I work 7 days a week, and I think the reason we do that is because projects come back to you when you least expect it. So your schedule's also, you're also in sway to your editor. So like, I just got these page passes today, and she said, can I have it back in a week? So I have to drop everything and just focus on that. So you learn to prioritize. I just definitely try to do a little work every day, and it just depends what's going on. Like, so before I got these page passes back, I was just waiting on Matt, like laying out a chapter or two of Sunny as the art got to me. I would lay it out, wait for him, lay it out. So sometimes you just have to like wait till something comes back to you. It's a very frustrating way to live sometimes. So, you know, like I would like to know sometimes like when things are going to happen, but everybody's just, you know, strung out. So you have no control, I would say.
Right. Yeah.
Like many Christmas Eves, we've been told that we've got edits coming, and, you know, you know, it's like typical. Yeah.
That's not fun. So actually, people have been asking questions, and I feel like maybe maybe I should transition over to people asking questions directly. So
Okay.
if you want to raise your hand in the participants window, you guys know how to do that. Click on participants and then click on raise hand.
I can just go through the chat. Hang on.
Sure.
Finding a good independent editor. You know, I've used different ones over the years. I have recently recommended one on LinkedIn who I like. I'll find her name when I'm done. I mean, I've used, so there's quite a lot of editors who do freelance editing. Usually they've worked at a house before, so now I think a typical thing is often they've had a baby or they're in a different stage in their life, and so they still want to keep their hand in it, but they're not consumed with it. So will editors or agents look at writer-only graphic novels? I have no idea. So I think that you mean that you just wrote the graphic novel for, actually I think yes, it depends. I think agents and editors are really happy when a single person comes in and can do everything. That's like a win-win for them. Or like a team, we're a team, but I don't really know how many other teams there are like us. But I do know, you know, of course, at some houses, like First Second, they will buy a manuscript and then they will find an artist. I think you know, I don't know if there's one right way. The problem with finding an artist is you need to find somebody who's very early in their career and isn't booked up for the next 5 years. That's probably the biggest problem. Sorry, I'm late. Emergency vet appointment. Oh, hope the dog's good. The picture. How can I find a critique group for graphic novels? I have no idea about that one. SCBWI has started in the last couple years to talk about graphic novels in their regional meetings, but they're still, I feel like they're still mostly a picture book driven organization with some middle grade thrown in.
I'm actually planning to start something like that in Kids Comics Unite, so that's coming, everybody.
So I love romance novelists. Yes, they are constantly innovating. Yes, the top was from Deandra. The top is the narration, middle is art, the bottom is dialogue. Do you plan the thumbnails for the whole graphic novel, or is it generally a few pages at a time? We write the whole graphic novel in text. We edit it in text repeatedly with our editor. After it's approved, then Matt starts drawing. We learned the hard way once and actually sketched out a graphic novel first, and nobody liked it, and that was a lot of work. So we always have our manuscript approved first, and then we thumbnail the entire thing. You know, I do a layout like this for the entire book, and then I have my editor look at that, catch any mistakes or move things around, and then Matt starts the final art. I mean, by the time you go to final art, you don't want any changes. I mean, you're just going to give your artist a complete nervous breakdown. I mean, it's just you have to just be really cognizant of how much work it is. Drafting novels. I wonder how her process for drafting novels is different from graphic novels. What makes an idea best for one versus the other? Huh, that's a good question. I never thought about that. I think you can do in a graphic novel anything that you're going to do in a novel. But I think where a graphic novel wins out over a novel is if you really want to show something fantastic, maybe. Fantasy really is great in graphic novels. If you're doing something that's not super talky, that's not super narrative driven, you don't want like an entire, you don't want to be bombarded by text in a graphic novel. I feel like you keep your text a little starker, and sometimes you let just like a look on somebody's face says what, you know, pages will say in a book. I do not have any historical fiction on the horizon. Tell Barb I said hi. I'm sorry. It's science fiction though. It's science fiction. The biggest project my little brother and I ever accomplished together was wash a car. I know. Yeah, you guys should totally start an online criticism group. I'm writing my graphic novel in script format. Is this okay? Absolutely. I think I'm like a total outlier in using the storyboard layout, and so I just, you know, I brought up my editors to read that way, but I think most people probably do their scripts in like a traditional film script layout, you know, like Neil Gaiman and anybody from Marvel, DC. That's how they write, you know, they kind of do a film version of their script. That's totally fine.
There's actually somebody who has their hand raised. It's Eric. Eric, can you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Awesome.
Actually, Charlotte has a question.
Oh, yay.
Hello.
Squish books, are you going to make any more?
Am I going to make any more Squish books? We want to make some more Squish books, but we are on hold with Squish for some good news. So Squish is being made into an animated TV series in France.
Hey.
So have your dad take you to France. It's airing in France right now. Hopefully you'll find an American home soon. But until like it's out, we're kind of waiting to do more books.
Who is the French publisher?
The French animation company is called Cottonwood Media, and it's airing on their like equivalent of Nickelodeon in France.
Uh-huh.
I forget what it's called, Like Google Squish on French TV, it'll pop up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Violet.
Any other questions? Raise your hand. You want to talk to Jenni? There's got to be more people.
Everybody's tired.
Yeah, maybe so.
It's the Zoom COVID overkill.
Yeah. Let me check. Oh, Ed wants to know about your Mars book and the challenges you faced.
So, wow. So, yeah. So, my new book is coming out in this next spring, or actually just in January, and it's called The Lion of Mars. And it was just as hard to research as historical fiction. When I first started writing it, I thought, oh, it'll be fun because I don't have to do any research. And I was like, I was completely wrong. I have spent so much time with talking to NASA people and SpaceX people, I can't tell you. And what's very interesting about it is, as opposed to historical research, where you can kind of come to a agreement about like what was going on in the past, or you can't come to agreement about what the future is going to be like, and they're only like in it from this moment. You know, they can't look 100 years down the road. So it's basically about you know, so I'd always wondered for years. So my family, my dad's family, who I wrote the first book about, they emigrated from Finland in the late 1800s and settled in Washington State and became farmers. And they might as well have gone to Mars because they never returned to Finland. And similarly, on my mother's side of the family, one set of grandparents came from Italy and never returned home. Another grandparent emigrated from the Bahamas and never returned home. So it was like this generation of people like left their countries and never went home. And some of them probably could talk to them on the phone, but they literally, you know, it was like going to space. And so I wondered what it would be like if you were a kid living on Mars in kind of a small, like farming type community. And so that's what Lion of Mars is about. Ironically, the really big plot point in it is that there's a disease that sweeps through the settlement. So the timing is a little weird, is all I have to say. Very weird.
Wow.
Did I consider, you know what, I didn't consider pitching to the comic companies. I think because by the time I pitched Babymouse, you know, I'd had about 9 children's books out. I loved the way that the kids' book world worked. It still seemed to me at the time that it still felt comics was feeling very serious, very late 1990s, very dark, very Watchmen-y. Mm-hmm. And honestly, by that time, comics had completely moved away from kids. They had walked away from their original audience like 100%. So I didn't see getting anywhere with traditional comic retailers.
So actually, Celine said that Sunny Side Up is one of her favorite graphic novels.
Oh.
And she was wondering if you could tell a little bit about the inspiration.
So that is a good story, actually. So I actually started writing Sunny Side Up as a novel, a historical fiction novel, because, sweetie, because, you know, the 70s are historical fiction now, which is shocking, I'm sure, to everybody. And 80s too, 90s are just around the corner. So I started writing it. I got about 40, 50 pages in, and it just wasn't clicking. I think mostly because I wanted to just show her reaction to things happening. I think when things happen to kids in real life, they don't just launch into a monologue. Like, that's something a 20-year-old does. Kids just kind of like look on in stunned silence as things happen around them. Sometimes they don't even know what to say. And so it was starting to feel like very inauthentic. And so I asked Matt if he wanted to do it as a graphic novel, and he said yes. And then we were really lucky, and we took it to Scholastic Graphics, where our friend Ed used to work, and he was a big champion of me, and I think that helped get us in the door over there. And then we started working on with David Levithan, who's also an author himself. So he's a great editor. And it was really fun. I think it was really hard. It was the first time Matt drew people. He's always been drawing like mice or amoebas. it was a lot of historical research for him and me. Like I had to give him like, here, you need visual scrap of everything. So, but it was ultimately really great. So now that we're kind of in the zone, it's easier because the palette is there. The characters are basically there. So it's not as hard as it used to be.
Cool. Nadia has a great question, which is, do you have anything you'd want to work on, but you don't think publishing is ready for it?
Not really. No, I mean, so I think what has let me do, the reason I've been able to do so many things is because I don't care what people think, or I don't care if I get turned down. I think probably because I worked in advertising for 10 years, and that is just a brutal industry where you are rejected on a daily basis to your face all the time. Like people say, no, your idea is bad, you're wrong. And so you develop a little bit of a thick skin. But also my agent honestly has always been really encouraging of whatever I wanted to try. And I think if I, you know, when she was, you know, she was a huge supporter of Babymouse for years, the years that it took us to get it off the ground. So she's always been very open-minded.
Somebody raised, it's Ben. Ben raised his hand. Ben, can you unmute yourself? Are you there, Ben? Let's see. Oh, I see you. Can you hear us, Ben? Oh, there's no audio. Uh-oh. His mic is not working. Well, I guess he can ask the question. Can you ask the question in chat?
I did write a romance, an adult romance, before I had kids that I got turned down. That I can't go back to now that I have kids because there's sex in it. I just can't. Ruined for life. I'm just going to keep reading it. From Audrey. I'm working on my first graphic novel. And then begin there. I think it's just part of the process, yes. So going from a script to thumbnails is a loosey-goosey thing for sure. You know, when you go to that, and that's when you kind of do experiment, and our editors have always encouraged us, like, that's a good place to see if you want to do like a big splash page. And so that is just part of the process of laying things out. Did I encounter a lot of resistance being an artist-writer team when that's not unusual? I was lucky in that I didn't. I'm trying to think. We really didn't, and I think it was just because I had been in the industry for a while by that time. Doesn't seem like I was, but I was. And so I knew how it worked, and I guess they just took a leap of faith on us, honestly. I look back and I'm like, that probably could not happen today. So it was a bit weird. It was a bit weird.
So I think a couple of people had asked questions that have to do with pitching a series. Like when you originally pitched Babymouse, did you say you wanted it to be a series? Yeah, so we pitched it as a series. They bought 4 books to start. There's sometimes this general agreement that you need for a series to get off the ground. You need at least 4 books on the shelf, and that's when, you know, readers will be hooked by the 4th. And then they would just sign us up for, you know, as many as Matt could write. I don't know what I don't know the temperature of the industry is right now in terms of series buying. I mean, I feel like series is great. It's much harder to do something new than to do something you already know about, but it can get a bit old after a while. So when they published Babymouse originally, did they have you sort of front load did they have you finish a couple of books and then they started publishing? Yeah, so we totally front loaded. The first 2 books were done and launched simultaneously, and then the next 2 books were launched that year. So we did. Oh, wow. I know. So we started off publishing for the first year. It was, I mean, Matt almost had a nervous breakdown.
And then we went to 3 a year, which was still teetering on the edge, because each baby mouse is 90 pages. So that's, you know,
Whoa.
that's 400 pages of art. It was crazy. And then we went to 3 a year for many years, and then went to 2. So that was much more sensible. And we also streamlined our process more. I mean, some things that helped to streamline the process from the beginning was that instead of Matt, we don't hand letter. Matt created a font. He created a font based on his handwriting, so that's the Baby Mouse font. He did something with Squish too, so that Random House can just drop in the text and make text changes. We don't have to belabor everything. They just do it. That definitely helps. Everything is done digitally for us now too. How long did it take before you were able to quit your day job? I was trying to remember. So I definitely was at home by 2001. So I don't know how old I was. I think I was about 30 by then. So I mean, I started my first book at 23, so about 7 years to quit my day job. Since I'm not a book designer, I'm sort of guessing how many panels to put on each page. I assume the editor or book designer will totally change this. I'm an author and illustrator, but also hoping. So I don't know about that. Most of the illustrators I know, they lay out their pages themselves, you know. And sometimes the designers get, the publishing designers get involved. But we have really never had that much of an issue with layouts.
Yeah.
It's just such a lot of work, you know. I think one thing about comics is you have to be, you can't be precious. Otherwise, you're gonna give yourself a complete breakdown. You just have to be able to keep the workflow moving, you know.
You know, I have another question. Since you're somebody who writes in many different genres and even different formats, obviously you're a fount of creativity, which I think probably most people who are on this call are like that. How do you personally keep track of your ideas as they come?
Yeah, I mean, I usually, if I'm working on something, I only have like one idea at a time. I don't know how to say this. Like if I'm working on Sunny, like writing, I do not think about anything else. Like I just close my brain off, which is why romance is fabulous. It's like, you know, it's like a nice palate cleanser. I can still keep reading, but it's not serious, and it keeps our marriage alive. I literally don't think of anything else when I'm writing. I don't actually try to even have more ideas than I can just focus on at one time. So I find that just staying in the moment is just the way to go.
Cool. Let's see, are there more questions coming? Oh.
Yes, kill our darlings. That is very true. Definitely learn to kill your darlings. Are there any graphic novel reference type books? Yes, so everybody should read Scott McCloud's book.
Understanding Comics.
Understanding Comics is probably the Bible for comics creators. The other thing, honestly, is I've always been a huge comic reader, is read comics. Although I like newspaper strips a little bit more, like the old ones. I think read comics widely, read old stuff, read new stuff. Still, some of my very favorite comics are Prince Valiant and Flash Gordon, you know, from the 30s. And just, it's good to just read it just for, even just look at them. Especially if you're an artist, you'll see like how they lay things out, how they use text. It's just fun. Or even like, I was, you know, wasting time and ran across some website that was printing French comics from the late 1800s, and they have like my French is poor, but just looking at the layouts was so interesting, how they used to lay out comics or political cartoons in France. Yes, all my graphic novels are series. They are. I don't have a set time that I spend writing. I mean, it used to be I would get my kids to school, and then I would write until I had to pick up my daughter. But even before COVID, I found what was happening. I mean, during my career, the times I write has changed. When I had children at home and babies and stuff, it's always kind of moved around. But right before all this craziness happened, I found like my best writing time was like 4 o'clock on, not late, but like 4 to 7. I think I was just mostly didn't want to cook dinner. That's why. I hate cooking. So I lived in New York City for 14 years, so I never learned to cook. We had no kitchen, so I was a big fan of takeout. So.
Oh, Tintin's question is good. How do you tune into kids' mindset?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think I pretty much write in the same general age group. I don't really go above age 12 or 13, I would say. I'm solidly middle grade, which is maybe 3rd grade to like 8 to age 12. So middle grade, if you hear that term thrown around, it really means books that are going to be in an elementary school library, maybe a middle school library on the lower end. They're generally pretty clean. There's usually not a lot of references to sex or violence, not too much murder. And then after that, you go up to YA, which is young adult, and then you can do whatever you want there. You can just go bonkers. So I hated being a teenager. I liked being an elementary school student. So my sweet spot is probably like age 11. And sometimes you don't determine the audience. So the weirdness of Babymouse is that we wrote it, there were no comics for girls. I grew up with boys. I wanted there to be a girls comic. There were never even girl characters. I mean, I know Wonder Woman is enjoying a great comeback, but I was, as an 8-year-old girl, like, she didn't really appeal to me. So we sort of thought we were creating it for 3rd graders, which is like 8 years old. But in reality, it's picked up strongly in 1st grade, and it goes up to middle school. I've met so many librarians who they keep Babymouse in their middle school library. The way you keep Peanuts in a middle school library, it's like a comfort read. Their kids look ironically back on their youth and remember fondly. So it has this very wide spread, which is funny. Like, kindergartners are reading it, except they're not getting any of the cultural references, but they can read it because it's diagramming reading, like they can see what a speech bubble is. So it's a real easy thing for a little guy to pick up. But we also thought, mistakenly, that only girls would read it, and it's completely read as much by boys. So that was our own, blindness.
Oh, question about pitching series versus standalones. There are plenty of graphic novels for kids that are standalones. It's not all series. No,
not at all. I don't think you have to. I don't think you need to say I need to make a series ever at all. I mean, if you do, you have to commit to doing the same thing for years. For young, I mean, I think you kind of have to go with your heart. I mean, we really wanted Babymouse to be a series. We really wanted Sunny to be a series, but I can't remember what the deal. Can't remember how many books we sold, but we definitely, Matt and I definitely prefer to work on series. Shanda, what does it mean for young? How young should it be? Is that what you're asking?
Are you here, Shanda? You could unmute yourself.
I am.
Okay, cool.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I love the Third Mushroom and all those books are so awesome. But yes, you answered my question. It was just for the young graphic novels. They seem to typically be series. And I have an idea that I'm working on that I feel like I might be forcing to think series-wise. It's probably more of a standalone. So I don't know. I was just wondering.
I think the reason that the younger readers like series is that at that age, kids are like collectors. They're very young, so they latch onto something and they want to just keep reading it. And so you'll find that there are a lot of series out there. Anything, Junie B. Jones, all these these early readers that are kind of up to 90 pages. They're like 60 or 90 pages. It's just something that kids, they just latch onto it. They're very loyal. They're very loyal readers. So,
Gotcha.
am I better off pitching my middle grade novel as a series? That's a cute idea to have a book with each character. That's adorable. I don't know. I think probably the hardest thing is just to sell the first one, honestly, is my best advice. Because sell the first one, obviously, if it's successful, your editor will be knocking on your door before it's published, because they'll have the sales numbers already. So I would just try to sell the first one.
Yeah. Since you've been with us for about an hour, I wanted to maybe wrap it up soon. And I think Rivka has a really great question, which we haven't talked about yet. So her question was, how do you present or talk about your graphic novels at schools?
So at schools, Matt and I, we do the same presentation. We have a PowerPoint presentation that's pretty much geared towards 1st through 5th graders, where we do a funny presentation for about 10-15 minutes tops, showing what our childhood was like, and then how we created Babymouse, and then we kind of go through the process, actually like what I just talked through, of how we make them. And then we do a live readers theater of a scene from Babymouse, where I call children up to the stage and we get them to act it out. I think with elementary school kids, we try to keep them very active and fun and happy. And then we both draw. We draw on command by the children. Like, I'll have a kid come up and say, if you could have Babymouse be anything, what would you have Babymouse be? And usually it's like Babymouse is a mermaid. Then I'll draw that, and then I'll I kind of do like 15 minutes PowerPoint, readers theater for 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes of drawing, and then 15 minutes of Q&A. So you keep it really interactive, so they're excited.
Awesome.
It's the opposite of a lecture, literally. I mean, we do dance. If we have a lot of kindergartners in there, like we present to kindergartners, they're rolling around on the floor. Sometimes we'll do like a little squish dance with them and get them up and moving about. So good to know your audience. Actually, elementary school is easy to present to. Middle school is hard. They don't smile until you're almost over, and then all of their hands shoot up like just as it's over. But they won't even smile at you until the very end. Horrible.
So I don't know. There's one last question from Nadia about the themes. Like, are there certain themes that sort of thread through all of your work, or that fascinate you, that you'll never stop writing about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I write again and again about family, because I came from such a large, complicated family. 5 kids. So I have plenty of material there. I'm always trying to figure out families. I think younger kids, I think most middle grade books are middle grade writers, and elementary school books, kids focus inward. They focus on their families and their immediate friends and their school. It's when you get into YA that they look outward and imagine their life, and they imagine romance and, politics, maybe activism, but that doesn't occur too much on the younger end. So, science, yes, science. I do write about science and medicine, and that's because my dad was a doctor. So he was a pediatrician. So, and my mom was a pediatric nurse. So we literally grew up with like everything at the dinner table that you can imagine. So I just thought everybody grew up that way.
Well, thank you so much, Jenni. This was so great. And thanks to all of you guys for being here. Somebody just joined. Oh, that's too bad. But anyway, one thing I should mention is I'm in the process of trying to organize the meetup for August. So hopefully we will have a new guest for August. But in the meantime, hopefully we'll get to meet Jenni at an SCBWI conference or a Comic-Con or something like that in the future, once we're all able to socialize in person again.
I know. I can't wait to travel again.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jenni. This is awesome.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye.